this is the last session of Module 2. So what I wanted to do with this session is really just spend a little bit of time just as a bit of a recap as well of what we've covered. So there is some new stuff in there. I'm going to talk a lot about standard operations, and once you've got some improvements, how you bed those improvements in. So there's an element of talking about standard operations, and then how you plan for rolling out your ideas that you've got. So you might well have been, as part of your trial, you're focused in on one particular area. So what you're looking at to do as part of this stage is think about how you can now roll this out across the rest of the business. So I've got a few ideas, a few things that I've tried over the years. So I'll give you the benefit of that, of what's worked and what hasn't worked. So hopefully that'll help you when it comes to identifying where else you can apply these lean techniques. This is the last one that I'm delivering this on Module 2. David Crowfoot, who did Module 1 for you, is going to be delivering Module 3. We'll be both together on the first one so that we can have an efficient handover, and I'll give David a briefing on the projects that you've been working on. So David's up to speed with your project. So we both delivered the next one, but then David will deliver the rest of Module 3. So today, have a bit of a review. I'll spend quite a bit of time talking through what we've already covered. I'll talk about new stuff, which is standard operation documents, so how you capture your improvements, and then what we'll talk about then is how you roll out your successes that you achieved in your trials so far. We'll talk through how you can go about that, and then really just talk about your projects and how things are progressing on the projects that you've been working on. So that's the session for today. In terms of the topics, this is a review of what we've covered so far in the 2 modules. So last week we were talking about trials and improvement trials, and in particular problem resolution charts. So when you're doing trials, how you log problems and how you use them problems then to identify more things that you can improve upon. And really what you're trying to do as part of that is get more and more people involved in the improvement activity itself. And hopefully that way people are getting motivated by the fact that they're getting involved in doing the trials, and hopefully they're starting to see the benefits in terms of improved output and improved productivity. And therefore that's motivated them to want to identify more improvement activities. And really what today is all about is, like I said, how you capture those improvements that you've made as part of your trials, and how you embed them into your normal way of working. Because the risk is, if you don't do this, and it's not the most exciting part of a project, I'll be dead honest with you. You're writing down and documenting what it is that you've done and what improvements you've achieved. Not the most exciting part of a project, but if you don't do it, there is that risk that when you're under pressure, when you're about to go into peak, when you're in peak, if you haven't documented it, if you haven't trained people up in this new way of working, the risk is that you slip back to the old ways of doing things. So that's why it's so important that you capture and consolidate the improvements that you've achieved. Bit more detail on today's agenda. So the review, how to fill in the standard operation documents, and you'll be familiar with them, those how-to guides that we send out after each module, or after each session, should I say. That's basically a standard operation document, so it's detailing. We've sent them out on how to do a waste walk, how to do a process map. So it's just detailing in real easy terms, simplistic terms, how you carry out a particular activity itself. So it might well be that you write standard operation documents for how to set up a potting machine, how to pick fruit. It might be how to pack the fruit on the line itself. So you're basically writing a standard operation document to tell people how to carry out a particular activity. And we'll just build on some of the stuff that we've covered from last time as well, in terms of problem resolution. We talked about one-page learning documents, how you document the benefits, the before and after of the project. So we'll just link it all back into that again as well. And the new stuff that we'll talk about today is we're going to show you how you can use pictures and images as a way of articulating what the improvements could look like in the future. So you've achieved an improvement in one area. You're now looking to roll that out across the rest of the business. One of the techniques that I use for doing that is we draw a picture of what the business could look like if you run these trials, these improvements across the whole business. What could the business look like? So I'll talk you through some examples of where we've done that before in the past, and how you can potentially use that. That's today's session. Brief recap of what we've covered. So module 1, this is what we covered. We talked about the 5 principles of lean. The main thing is the tin woods, the waste. So getting you to think about identifying waste in the operation where you've got too much transport, where you've got too much stock, or too much packaging materials, for example, that's consuming space in the operation. Movements of people, where you've got people walking around all over the place, trying to get crates, trying to find crates for picking into, or walking backwards and forwards to weigh scales. So they're all classic examples of movements. Waiting could be waiting for materials, waiting for transport. So it delays, basically. We're in the process itself where people are waiting for things. Could be waiting for access to weigh scales in a picking area. Overproduction is producing more than what's required. So you're growing more crop that you can sell, or you're lifting more crop than what dispatch can send out the door. So you're going over and above what the customer requirements are. Overprocessing might be where you're grading out too much stock. You're spending too much time and losing too much stock by grading it out. You're being a little bit too overzealous on the quality side of things and grading out fruit or veg that you could potentially sell to the customer. So you're exceeding the customer specifications, basically. Defects is where you've not met the specification, so you're below the specification, and therefore you've got to scrap the products off, and you've got to do some form of rework. And then the skills and talent side of things is just getting better utilisation out of the people that you've got within the business. So just recognising that if you're employing people to do waste, you're not getting the best out of those individuals and what they can potentially deliver to you and to deliver to the business in terms of value. So that's the summary of what we covered in module 1. And in this module, we took you through process mapping. So we showed you how to do process maps using post-it notes, identifying non-value add on one particular colour post-it note and value adding on another. I usually use yellow and pink for when I'm process mapping. And then on the process maps, you record down all the different activities. So you break the process down into its individual steps, and you record down all those the descriptions of those activities. How long does it take you to do them? I normally record down the distance as well. So you start to produce what we call a current state process map, so a map of what you currently do. And then from that, you can calculate how much time you spend adding value, how much time you spend not adding value, and what's your total lead time for the process. And this is where lean gets its name from. Lean is essentially getting rid of those yellow post-it notes on this screen, getting rid of the waste and non-value add. So we get rid of the waste, we can improve productivity, and hopefully what we can start to do as well is compress the lead times, so to reduce the lead times down. So we talked through about process mapping. We then got you to think about waste walks themselves. So this is just a spreadsheet that we sent you a template of, and quite a few of you guys have filled these waste walks in now. So this is where you just simply take the information from the process map, you record it down onto a spreadsheet, and it's just an easier way of displaying the data. So you can see how much time spent adding value, how much time spent not adding value. What you may have on this is the number of times per day you carry out a particular activity. So it might only be that on the process map you only see it once, but you may carry out that activity numerous times a day. So that adds weight to the cumulative time, basically, for carrying out this activity. So you can start to focus in on which steps don't add any value and do you do the most frequently. they're the ones that you need to focus in on, because these are the ones, when we started talking about Pareto analysis, these are the ones that have the biggest contributor to the overall amount of time involved in the process. So we're focusing on these ones first of all. This example here, 55%, that's where you're going to get the majority of the savings, by improving those elements. And then on the waste walk on the right hand side, we started to identify the different types of waste. So it's just, again, a simpler way of displaying the information, so you can see the types of activities and what types of waste you've got within those process steps. So that was waste walk. We then moved on to populating your process maps. So we used two different coloured post-it notes. I use green ones to talk about problems, and then orange ones to talk about ideas that people have got about what they can do to improve it. So once you've got your process map up on the wall, I then start to invite the different people involved with the process. So people from dispatch, people from IT, people from maintenance, and get them involved as well, to start thinking about what some of the issues are and what kind of things you can do to reduce down the amount of waste within the process itself. So that's the idea of doing it on post-it notes, is so that you can move it around. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. You can just simply move the post-it notes, or keep adding to it. As more and more people get involved and review it, you can keep adding to it. So it's just a really good way of getting people involved in looking at how to improve the process itself. So basically, hopefully, what you get to at this point, you end up with more problems than you can actually fix. That's a nice situation to be in, because it means there's lots of improvement activity you can get involved and look at. So, because the worst situation is you do your process maps, you get everybody involved, and you can't identify any problems with the process, because then you've got nothing to work on. So I always quite like it when we end up with loads and loads of problems from the process map, because that means that you can then you've got something to work on. You can start working your way through that big long list. And this is what we use as a way of simplifying and identifying what things to work on. We talked about a prioritisation matrix. So I just get a flip chart, split it up into 4 segments. You've got easy to do, hard to do, low benefit, high benefit, and then you take your post-it notes off your process map, and you just simply populate them onto this flip chart and say, right, this post-it note that I've got, this idea that I've got, is it easy to do, hard to do? Is it low benefit, high benefit? And what you're looking for are lots and lots of ideas that fall up into that top category, left-hand side. So these are the things that are easy to do, high benefit. That's where you start focusing on first of all. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got the items which are hard to do, low benefit. Chances are you'll never get around to doing those. So it's just a really easy way of prioritising those ideas, so you're focusing on the ones that are going to generate the quickest wins. So that was prioritisation matrices that we covered as part of module 2. And then this slide is just putting it all together onto one slide. So we talked about process mapping, waste walks, prioritising or identifying those the wastes and the issues, and identifying what the wastes are and what the potential solutions are, using the prioritisation matrix, and then from your quick wins, hopefully these become your prioritised solutions that you do your trials on. You put together your action plans and what it is that you're going to do. You then carry out your actions, and you go back and you measure. You're using your post-it notes and process mapping. You go back and you measure to see what the improvements are. So that gives you an idea of the before and after for the actual project itself. Last time we talked about resolution charts. So these are charts that are displaying the actual area where you're doing the trial itself. The idea being anyone can identify a problem, anyone can write them up on the actual resolution chart itself. Normally they write up there what the problem is that they've identified during the trial, and then once a week I get that team together and I say, right, what were the problems that we identified during the trial? what are the ideas that we've got on what we can do to actually fix those problems, and that way we can make sure they never come back again. And normally, once I've got the trial up and running, it becomes a normal way of working. What I tend to do is leave these charts in place so they become like a regular way of just keeping a track of what issues and problems that you've had within the trial itself, and then that way you can keep going back and looking at what you can do to keep improving the process. It becomes a normal way of working, where you have these weekly meetings to talk through the issues and think about what it is that you can do to overcome these problems. So that way, hopefully the problems start to diminish. They gradually start to go away as you carry out further and further improvements. So that's the idea of these problem resolution charts, and the ideas of these weekly meetings to focus in on tackling the problems that have occurred during the process itself. So we covered that last time. The other thing we talked about was documenting your improvements, and I know quite a few of you started to send across documents now where you've documented the before, you've documented the after. You know, that might be the process map that shows the before and after. It might be a picture of the two improved processes. What the performance improvement's been. So how much money has it saved? What did it cost to do? Has it impacted on any metrics? And then what your ideas are about what the next stages are. So how you plan to roll this trial out across the rest of the operation. So that's what we've just been through. That's a one-page learning point. So that the thought process behind this is it captures whatever improvements you've achieved. It's a really good way of then sharing that across other parts of the business. Some businesses I've worked in, they've been multi-site operations. So, you know, you're repeating the same things, but in different locations spread around the country. So documenting it down like this, you can just email it to other parts of the business and you can share with them what you've done. So it's a really good way of ramping up the savings that you've achieved in one area and spreading it across the rest of the business itself. So that's basically what we talked about last time, and what we covered as part of a bit of a review of module 2. Right, so this session, I just wanted to spend a bit more time talking about standard operations, and the idea behind this is going back to what we're saying. It's just a way of capturing the new ways of working. So basically, you've got a new improved process. So a bit like what we're looking at for where the trays are going down, or it might be the way you're going to pick the fruits and pick the veg. So you document down what the new process is. And the idea behind it is that you try and get people to work in the same standard way as much as you possibly can. There's always going to be variation, but a natural level of variation between individuals. But you want people largely following best practice and doing it largely the same way so that you can maintain and guarantee quality and make sure you're doing it at the right consistency of work. So that's what we use these standard operations to do. And the other great thing about documenting it as well is it means it's easier to train people. As your industry, the industry that you work with, where you may have a large numbers of seasonal labour coming in, that ability to train people up quickly and get them up to speed and get them up to rate as quick as possible, it could be absolutely crucial. So this is using these standard operation documents is a good way of doing that and making sure that you're capturing all that particular best practice. And this example of one on the right-hand side, it's the kind of things, I'm going to show you one. It's the kind of things that we've been using with you when we've been sending out the user guides in between each of the sessions. So I was going to share the one that we did, which was how to run a Kaizen event. That looked brilliant. So yeah, this is your classic standard operation document. So this is one that we did for you, which was all about how to run a Kaizen. So basically what you've got is the major steps written down step by step, how you actually carry out the particular activity. So for you guys, it could be how to set up a packing line, how to set up a potting machine, how to carry out a particular job role on a packing line itself. So you've got a description of the major steps, the key points that are involved. So it could be something linked into quality. You know, you might have a key point might be careful when you're doing this that you don't damage the crop, so you don't sort of like damage the vine in any way when you're taking the fruit off. So that could be a key point, or it could be a health and safety issue that you want to raise to make sure people are wearing the right protective equipment. So that's normally what we put in the key point stage. And normally over the right-hand side, I usually populate it with pictures. Or more and more these days, I have links to YouTube videos. So I videotape the process and I just put links in there of YouTube videos. So that way people, as they're working their way through this document, they can then refer to the YouTube videos as well. And to be honest, I think more and more, the more I've used the videos, I think that's a better way of doing it. I'm almost tempted these days to document the whole process using videos, and that way people can access it from a smartphone. They can access it from wherever they are. You know, so if they're actually out doing the picking job and they want to remember how to do a particular activity, they can quite simply just look at the video online and then get a reminder of how to carry out that particular activity. Where one of the disadvantages with standard operation documents is it's got to be printed out. You've got to then go and refer to it and read it. So more and more now, being able to make these videos available online is an easier way, I often feel, of training people up. So that's what we mean by standard operation documents. And you can see on this one that we've done for you on the Kaizen, you know, we've detailed step by step everything that's involved in doing a particular task. And then we've tried to populate it as much as we possibly can do with pictures of how to carry out the various elements of the job itself. So this is the aim should be, you should be able to give this to somebody who's never done this job before, and they should be able to read through the standard operation document and have a good idea by the end of it of how to carry out a particular activity. So that's the aim of what you're trying to achieve, is to speed up being able to train somebody up in this particular activity and this particular job itself. Right, fantastic. Right, so yeah, basically that's the standard operation document. So it's just a way of documenting the step-by-step down to make it as easy as possible to train people. Traditionally, they've been Word documents, but more and more now I think people are making them sort of a series of photographs, and even better still, video. So that's what we're talking about with this way of capturing best practice. And that really just covers through what I was showing you in document itself. So one side of it is the main steps. So the idea of that should be, if you need a reminder, you just glance your way down through the main steps. That gives you a reminder of the actual process. The key points are bits that might be linked into safety or linked into quality that you want to highlight to people. And then basically this is the detail, which might be the photograph, and the video, which goes into the detail of how to carry out the particular activity itself. So these documents can be used to remind people as well. And I used to use them if I, for example, I was having an issue with quality on a particular job. The first thing I used to do is pull out the standard operation document, and then I used to read through it and watch the individual carrying out the job with the standard operation documents in front of me, and just see whether they were deviating away from it in any way. You know, to people, as they get more skilled, and if they're trying to work quicker, they might start skipping particular stages of the process. So I could use it just to see whether somebody was starting to skip things, and that was then starting to have an impact on quality or potentially safety as well. So I used to use them as a reference document when it used to come to problem solving. So this next bit really is just talking about how you do rollout plans and what you do with your rollout plans. So top left hand side, we've got the current state process map that we've done in a particular organisation, where we've mapped out, using the post-it notes, the classic step by step, what we're currently doing. Then we've identified the problems. And then what the group have done then is they've then started to identify what the new improved process could look like. And they're starting to draw out little pictures that show what the new process could look like if they took these improvements and applied them across all the business. This basically starts to get to identify what the process and what the organisation would look like if they rolled out all the improvements. So it's just getting you to think through what the wider impact would be of these particular improvements. So it might be that you draw out the layout of the packing area and what the packing area could look like if you carry out improvements. The example that I showed you before was of that organisation, the garden centre, making cappuccino coffee, and how they used a rich picture to show what the layout would be of the new hot drinks counter that they were trying to design. So it's just a way of just articulating and getting the group to think through, you know, what this new process could look like if they carry out all the improvements that they wanted to do. Because sometimes people struggle to see it. You know, they might not necessarily see it straight away. If they just see an action plan, which is just a series of activities, they might not fully understand what the improvements are. And when people don't fully understand what the improvements are, that's when you can start to see some resistance to the changes themselves. You know, people might be a bit frightened of what the changes mean because they can't got a vision of what those improvements are going to be, and therefore they resist those particular ideas. So just sketching it out this way, just by getting the group to agree what the new improved process will look like, will help overcome that particular problem, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to actually introduce those changes within the operation itself. So this is one of the first stages that I do when it comes to doing a rollout plan. The first thing that we do is just sketch out what the new improved process could look like. And then your action plan is simply the steps that are involved in taking the process from this current state towards this future state that you've started to draw out using pictures. And quite often the term that people use, they call them rich pictures. So that's the term that they use for these particular pictures that show what the process could look like. And then you develop your action plan. So you start to break down what are all those steps involved. You know, things like training people, making sure that you communicate to everybody what the changes are going to be. If you need to do any physical changes to the layout, how are you going to get the maintenance teams involved in carrying out those physical changes. It might well be that you've got to run trials. You might want to set up a visual management board so you can capture the improvements. So the idea being is that you document all this on your action plans, and that's your way of capturing the improvements that you want to do. So you simply write down the actions, who is it that's going to do it, when they're going to do it by, when they completed it, and it might well be that you just put an update in there. So it might be some of these actions take quite a while to do. You know, you've got to order something in. It might take a few weeks to get those items in. So what I used to do is just write down in the update column what progress was being made on getting those items in, so people didn't lose a little bit of faith that this action was going to fall by the wayside. You know, they knew that something was being worked on for that particular action. And another way of doing it that I've started to use more and more, it's a technique called Kanban. It's a visual trigger system, basically. Kanban is Japanese for trigger, and it's a trigger for action in this particular instance. And I used to simply just get a whiteboard and then have 3 columns on the whiteboard. These are the activities that we're going to do this week. These are the activities that we're currently working on, and these are the activities that we've done. So these activities would be items on the action plan, and I used to just write them down onto post-it notes. And once a week, I used to update it to say, and hopefully what you're seeing is the post-it notes are moving across. So this is your backlog of things you've got to do. I've moved them across into, this is what we're going to do this week. And then once we've completed those items, I've moved the post-it note across to the done column. And hopefully you start to move across more and more of these post-it notes during the week itself. If for any reason you're having problems with a particular action and it wasn't moving that well, perhaps you needed some resources to carry out this particular activity. So you might need a bit of money to be able to spend, or it might be you need access to a forklift truck driver or maintenance. And if for some reason you're not getting that, you put it down in this bottom section, which is what we call blockers. So these are the things that are blocking the project itself. And the idea being is that that's where the management team would get involved. So they'd be there to help remove those blockers so the project could keep moving. And again, by making it visual, by sticking up on a whiteboard, I used to get the project teams around the whiteboards once a week, so we could have a quick review of how things were going and just make sure things were progressing along. So this is just a way of articulating your rollout plans and making sure that they don't get forgotten. You know, people are aware of what they are. You can use it to communicate to everybody as well, so everyone's fully aware of what's going to be done and when it's going to be done. So that way it just gets more people involved in the change process itself. And by involving more people, hopefully that reduces down the potential resistance that you might come across. So that's the action plans for your improvements. So after you've done your trial, you've identified that the improvements are working. This is how you go about then rolling it out across the rest of the business itself. Okay, so that's as much. I did say this session was going to be a short one in terms of new content. So that's as much new content as I want to cover today. The next session in 2 weeks, we're just going to go into a bit more detail. So we're going to go into some of the techniques we use, things like activity sampling. So this is for doing the real detailed improvement activities within repeatable operations, things like picking, lifting, packing. We're going to show you a technique called activity sample to help you identify lots and lots of small improvements within a process itself. So that's what we're going to cover next time.